thanks a lot for taking your time to hear our analysis of the economy. My name is Ian Nicholson.
I'm Juan Obregon.
I'm Jason Bowles.
I'm Jeff Fraser.
Hello, I'm Joel Glenn. I manage public affairs here in Charlotte, and I am the presentation skills judge today.
Welcome, I'm Matt Martin. I'm an economist in the research department here in Detroit.
Claire Adkin, an educator and consultant for the North Carolina Council on Economic Education.
Please begin.
All right, well, Juan's going to go ahead and start us off here.
Okay, well, our group decided that the main dilemma that the Federal Reserve faces is whether to fight inflation or promote economic growth. And our research shows that growth in the economy is the top priority. So, the two components that we researched for inflation was the consumer price index, and the first component was total consumer price index and the core consumer price index. For the total consumer price index, the graph here shows the percent change in total consumer price index in the blue and the core consumer price index in the red. Now the total consumer price index includes energy and food. And last quarter was at 4.9%, which we believe, although it is a very high number, because the food and energy sectors are so volatile markets, we believe this number can be misleading. When taking core consumer price index, if you look at the graph, you see that it's relatively stable, between 2 to 2.5%. And the core consumer price index does not include energy and food. This is why we believe that the total consumer price index causes an exaggeration in total consumer price index. So we believe that that's where the exaggeration or the high number comes from. Recently, also, oil prices have begun to fall, and because energy is such a high section of the total consumer price index, we believe that since the fall has happened in the last quarter is at $73 per barrel, we believe that the total consumer price index might begin to fall on its own. Because the total consumer price index tends to be exaggerated because of energy and food, and the core CPI is relatively stable between 2 and 2.5%, we believe that inflation isn't as severe as it may seem.
As Juan has just shown, the core inflation is at reasonable rates and is relatively stable. Therefore, we believe that the Fed should be more focused on promoting economic growth. Our current economic situation does not look very promising. GDP showed a negative 0.3% growth in the last quarter. Unemployment has been rising. Consumer confidence is near record lows. And residential fixed investment has been negative since January of 2006. This is a graph of the real GDP growth rate. As you can see, 2 of the past 4 quarters we've experienced negative growth. We did experience a 2.8% growth in the second quarter of this year, but we believe this is mostly due to dropping value of the U.S. dollar and the ensuing increase in U.S. exports. We believe that the negative 0.3% growth that we experienced in this third quarter is more reflective of the downturn and the slowdown in the U.S. economy. The unemployment rate is currently sitting at about 6.1%. Most economists believe that the natural rate of unemployment is somewhere ranging between 5 and 5%. So 6.1 does not look horrible in that aspect, but we have to remember that that does not include discouraged workers, which during an economic downturn generally increases. And it also doesn't take into effect that unemployment will lag the business cycle. And as you can see, we had a recession in 2001, but the highest unemployment rates were not until 2003. So most economists are believing that our unemployment rate will probably rise to somewhere around 7%. Another indicator of our economy is the non-farm jobs created. As you can see, we've had negative growth in jobs this year. And as people are losing their jobs and less jobs are being created, people are looking for jobs in an ever-shrinking market. Another key indicator to strength of the economy is the Consumer Confidence Index. The latest information from the Michigan Consumer Confidence Sentiment shows that we are near record lows in consumer confidence. And since consumer confidence is inversely related to consumer spending, we can't really expect any kind of growth until people will get more confident in the economy again. From the graph, you can see that real total consumer spending, which is the total spending on durables, non-durables, and services, has finally turned into a negative annual growth rate in the third quarter of 2008, while real consumer spending on durables alone has been negative every quarter this year. This shows that people are spending less money on things such as cars, appliances, and furniture for this past year, and they've been opting instead just to keep what they've had. So instead of buying a new car or a new piece of furniture, they've been opting to use the old. And in the most recent quarter, people have actually have cut down their spending on durables and services also. So this means people are going to the doctor less, people are going out to restaurants less, and people are just spending less in general. This is the first time that the total consumer expenditure has been negative since the recession in 1991. And since consumer spending makes up around 70% of our GDP, we cannot expect our GDP to experience significant growth until we can restore consumer confidence in our economic system.
Perhaps one of the biggest obstacles to GDP growth in the recent years has been the decline in the housing market. This graph shows real residential fixed investment, which is basically the amount of money that's being invested into building new homes each year. As we can see, this graph shows the housing bubble following the recession in 2002. The housing market's really starting to pick up, and then we see it started to correct itself in late 2005. And ever since January 2006, real residential fixed investment has remained negative. That's what brings us to our next topic, which is the current financial crisis. The current financial crisis is a direct result of the subprime mortgage crisis. During the housing bubble, 2004, 2005, lenders, borrowers, insurers, and ratings agency all failed to properly identify risks. Mortgage lenders used the attractive housing market as a means to generate more loans. While many borrowers saw opportunities to invest in homes, many had the intention to enter into mortgages and resell these homes at a higher price. Bankers also wanted to capitalize on the housing market by bundling up mortgage payments and issuing mortgage-backed securities